screen. What's up, everybody? Hope you guys are having a good day. It has been a hell of a day in the true crime world. Some of the biggest cases that we have been covering for a while are now pretty much resolved. And we're going to talk about them and what this means, what sentencing looks like, all those kind of things as we come up. Now, that being said, if this is your first time here, please consider hitting that follow button or subscribe if you're on YouTube. We have Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok all watching. For my TikTok family, please tap that screen. Keep that number going. It goes out there. Today, we're going to be talking about both Diddy, Sean Diddy Combs, and what happened today at court and what this means. And the bail hearing just came in. And we're going to be talking about Bryan Kohberger and what changed, right? So let's talk about what's going on and why. So I got some notes pulled up here. I'm going to talk from the notes some, and I'm going to talk from the I'm going to talk from my heart, my knowledge a little bit too. So on July 2nd, 2025, today, Sean Diddy Combs was found guilty on 2 federal counts transporting women across state lines for prostitution. Okay. These convictions stemmed from incidents involving Cassie and, of course, the other woman, Jane. He was acquitted of the more serious charges of trafficking and racketeering. Each conviction carries a maximum of 10 years, but sentencing guidelines suggest a possible range of 51 to 63 months. Diddy's defense is expected to argue for a lighter sentence, possibly as low as 2 years, pointing to the time that he has already served. Following the verdict, Diddy's legal team requested that he was released on bond, proposing a $1 million secured by family, travel restrictions, and regular substance testing. They argued that because he was acquitted of the most serious charges, he no longer poses a significant flight risk or a danger to the public. But federal prosecutors pushed back hard, urging the judge to keep Diddy in custody until sentencing. They pointed out that he was convicted of a serious offense and reminded the court of prior allegations, most notably the violent 2024 assault on a key witness and his continued attempts to plan parties after the FBI raid, the S parties. Cassie also, who is one of the central victims of the case, as you all know, had her attorney submit a formal request to the judge asking that Diddy remain in jail. Let me repeat that. Cassie asked the judge to keep Diddy in jail. Her team emphasized that she is still in danger, and allowing him out on bail sends the wrong message to survivors everywhere. Cassie's statement acknowledged the emotional toll of her testimony and made clear that a conviction means nothing if her abuser walks free before sentencing. Now, what ultimately happened with this decision was that the judge did, in fact, deny bail. That just came down a couple minutes ago. He did deny bail. So Sean Diddy Combs will remain in custody until his sentencing, a date of which we do not know yet. They might be trying to figure that out right now. And if that happens while I'm on here, somebody let me know. But yeah, that's what we're waiting on. So when the verdict was read, Diddy appeared to be deeply emotional. He was seen praying, wiping his face, and later hugged his family, telling them, "I'll be home soon," and blew a kiss in mouth, "I love you," to his mom as supporters clapped. Outside a courthouse, I'm going to go real quick. I want to point something out real quick. I'm going to stop for a moment and point this out. If you are on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, you can see this comment that I'm making or that I'm highlighting. If you're not, I'll read it to you on TikTok. And I like to call these out. I'm going to tell you why. This says, "Cassie needs to stop. You got 30 million. Get security, Cassie." All right. I'm going to choose my words carefully here because it's YouTube. Money does not erase trauma. Money does not erase a real danger that is posed to somebody. She endured 11 years of physical abuse at the hands of this man. There are tons of allegations around him, but here's where I tend to struggle the most. When people like you come here and you say things like this, what you're doing in comments like this is basically you are diminishing what victims went through. You are diminishing what victims went through. You are trivializing their stories. And when you say things like she could have left, let me tell you what this says. It tells me that you know absolutely nothing about abuse. You know absolutely nothing about trauma. You have no idea what you're talking about. And that is why you hide behind a generic screen name with no picture or anything to identify who you are. And the reason I'm calling this out is this is somebody who is very obviously a man. Okay. And what I have decided I've gotten tired of is the racist comments and the misogynistic comments that these kind of men make. If you have had the privilege, and this goes to the women who are doing it too, if you have had the privilege of not having to been and live through an abusive relationship or an abusive partner or anything that was abusive, then consider yourself lucky. We're going to go ahead and put the user in timeout, meaning that we're not going to hear their comments anymore and we're going to remove them because it's my platform and I'm just tired of people doing that. You're not going to come onto my platform and you're not going to diminish victims. You're not going to come on and trivialize what they went through, and you're not going to be racist, homophobic, or anything else, any other type of, phobia. You're just not going to do that. It's a safe place for people to be here, and they are going to always be welcome here. So I'm going to pause and say that because when those things come out, I feel like as a guy, it is my responsibility, at least in part, to call out guys like this. Not that it means that it will change who they are or what they are as quote unquote men. And I use that term for guys like that very loosely. But we're going to start calling them out publicly because until more men call out these guys that are like this, we'll continue. And just because we do it doesn't mean it's going to stop. But I have a pretty large platform to be able to do it with. So that being said, now he's been muted. Outside the courthouse, fans have gathered in celebration. Some even reenacted details of the trial. Some of these people out there poured baby oil all over themselves, which is a bizarre reference to testimony about Diddy's freak-off parties, right? Then comes, all right, I changed my picture. Here we go. Got all worked up on that guy. Sorry. Now, the split verdict has sparked a fierce debate. Critics slammed the jury for not convicting on the trafficking charges, saying that it reflects a broader culture of disbelief towards survivors, which I tend to agree. Meanwhile, Diddy supporters celebrated his partial acquittal as vindication, ignoring the fact that 2 felony convictions still carry very serious consequences. So what's happening next? Well, you have the bail decision. The judge is expected to rule by 5 p.m., which he did. Sorry, I texted these notes later. On whether or not Diddy will remain free until sentencing. He was denied bail. A sentencing date has not been announced. Prosecutors expect to push for 4 to 5 years. That's what they're going to ask for. Diddy's lawyers will likely argue for a much shorter term, citing lack of priors, which means that he's a first-time offender. In the system, he has no convictions in the system. I'm already served, and that the not guilty findings on the traffic relating charges. So let's talk about what he could be facing, because I know a lot of y'all are very curious. So the exact charge, it's 18 U.S. Code subsection 2421, which is transportation with intent to engage in prostitution or criminal sexual activity. The maximum sentence is 10 years per count. There is no mandatory minimum sentence. Somebody said September 3rd is our sentencing. September 3rd. If that's correct, Lucas, thank you for telling us. I'm going to take that at face value. But Lucas has come in and said that it is looking at September 3rd. So thank you for that, my friend. I appreciate you. So that's what we're looking at, September 3rd. He's looking at up to $25,000 per count. So that's up to $500,000 per count, which for somebody like Diddy is absolutely nothing. So, again, because Diddy is a first-time offender and he was not convicted of coercion, trafficking minors, or violence under this statute, the court will likely consider these mitigating factors during sentencing. However, the following will increase his exposure: the high-profile nature of this case, multiple victims involved, and if the prostitution involved coercion, substances, or interstate schemes. Okay. What sentencing guidelines suggest is that federal judges are to use the U.S. sentencing guidelines as a reference. While the statute allows for up to 20 years, which is total, which is 10 per count, a first-time offender in nonviolent prostitution case might realistically face 2 to 6 years in federal prison per count, possibly served concurrently, meaning at the same time, or 3 to 10 years if aggravating factors are present, like multiple victims, abuse of power, interstate coordination of obstruction. So here's the factors and the impact that he has here. First-time offender could lower sentence. No violence or minors helps keep sentence lighter, because even though we've seen violence, that's not what he was convicted on. Okay, we know that he's violent, but that's not what he was convicted on. So that will help keep the sentence lighter. Given the fact that it's a high-profile case, might lead to a harsher sentence. Multiple victims and events increases sentencing exposure. So again, your max you're looking at is 20 years, but the realistic range is probably a total of 3 to 10, including what's already been served, which is by the time sentencing happens will be a year. He'll be a year into his sentence. Okay. One thing that I want to talk about too that's very interesting. So if you guys don't know who Alan Dershowitz is, Alan Dershowitz is a high-profile criminal attorney, very well-known attorney, made a name during the OJ trial. He came in, and normally I don't quote these types of experts, but I'm doing it in this case because I find it very interesting. And I think that what he's saying holds a lot of weight. And I think that you guys might want to know about it. Okay. So because he was convicted on these lesser of two charges, that puts him ripe for appeal. Dershowitz has suggested that because the jury acquitted Diddy on the most serious charges like racketeering and trafficking, there might be a legal inconsistency in still finding him guilty of transportation the transportation offenses tied to the same allegations. He hinted at the fact that Diddy's legal team could argue that verdicts are logically incompatible, raising the possibility that the appeals court could reverse convictions or send them back for further review. Basically, in his words, these two guilty verdicts could very well be appealed and possibly reversed, meaning that he would ultimately be found not guilty on all charges. So I want to talk about that. Now, real quick, I do want to say this because whenever we have people come in and do super chats, like Sarah did here, I want to thank you. I appreciate the support. Nothing that you have to do, but it's always very welcomed and very appreciated. So thank you, Sharon, for that. I want to talk about something else that I've seen a lot of questions about with this whole thing, which is he must have gotten to the jurors. He must have paid for the jurors. Now, here's the thing that I'm going to say about this. Okay. I am very much for a fair trial, right? Things are what they are. This is what the outcome was. The case was tried. A jury of his peers convicted him on 2 counts and found him not guilty on the other 3 counts. That is how it went down. It is my opinion that there is no way, shape, or form that he influenced any jury members. And I'm going to tell you why right now. Let's just say he got to 3 of them. Okay. He got to 3 of the 12. He got to a quarter of the jury. They're holdouts on everything. And they would still be in deliberations right now. They wouldn't have had convictions or made their decisions on verdicts, I should say, in 3 days. You would be holding out on those other guilty ones. And he wouldn't have gotten those either. So it is my opinion that, if you had something like that going on where he'd gotten, or a juror or jurors were compromised, then they would deliberate until there was nothing left to deliberate, and it would be hung jury and possibly a retrial, or working to convince the others. So I just want to make sure that you guys understand that's kind of where I'm coming from. I personally don't believe that he got to anybody. I know that with his money, his past, everything that's come out, that it seems very plausible, but I just don't think that that's the case in here. Now, that's what happened with Diddy. Now let's talk about this one, because this one came out of left field, and we're talking about Bryan Kohberger. Okay. We're talking about Bryan Kohberger, and it was very interesting, this hearing. I watched the entire thing. I took a lot of notes, and I'm going to go ahead and talk to you guys about some of what the judge started with. So there was a public outcry for the judge, for people to put pressure on the judge. Okay. And so at the start of the hearing, Judge Hippler directly addressed public calls to action that flooded their courthouse in recent days. He made it clear that calls, emails, and voicemails urging him to reject Bryan Kohberger's plea deal were not only inappropriate, but actively disruptive to the judicial process. He emphasized that these mass messages had overwhelmed court staff, interfering with other cases and other victims. The court would never base any decision on public opinion, media campaigns, or emotional appeals, and that he had not read nor listened to a single message, and that all voicemails and emails were diverted to security and, when appropriate, forwarded to law enforcement. His rulings would continue to be grounded solely in the law and facts presented in court. He stressed that the public cannot compel the state to seek the death penalty, nor can the court impose it unilaterally. His role was not to serve popular opinion, but to ensure that the plea was entered knowingly, voluntarily, intelligently. Basically, what he's saying is that his hands were limited. They were tied. And here's what I'm going to say to you guys, as somebody who will oftentimes come out and say, call your senators, call your congressmen, call somebody on this and ask them to whatever. I will never do that with the judge. That is not how the court system works. And by doing that, all people did was piss off the judge. So in the event, that type of thing, if he wasn't as even keeled as I feel that he has been, I think that would have not helped the public opinion. That he would have been more apt to be more lenient on the defendant because of what happened. Because it's enraging when you have a small courthouse and you're now impacting other victims, other court cases. And that's my opinion. They're not your congressmen and your senators. Call them, blow up their phone lines. Absolutely. Email addresses, kill them. Right? But you can't do that with a judge. Now, let's talk about, because this came out of left field, what led to the plea. And real quick, I will say this for those of y'all who are coming in late. This is recorded on YouTube. So if you guys want to come in late, you missed the Diddy stuff, or you missed some of the Kohberger stuff, or you got to go come back, you can go. This particular episode is both on the Moscow Murder in Moscow, Idaho playlist and the Sean Diddy Combs playlist. Y'all can watch it there if you guys came in late. So if you guys are like me, Kohberger's guilty plea shocked everyone, mostly everyone, especially after his very long resistance. And according to a trusted source, let's talk about why, his mother was initially the biggest obstacle. Marianne Kohberger was the biggest obstacle, allegedly. Whether trying to protect the family's image or simply as she was in denial, she reportedly stood in the way of early plea negotiations. The family was so against a deal that his defense team had to argue that Bryan had autism, basically to suggest that executing would be a cruel and unusual punishment. And sources also close to the case say that it was a strategic move, not a sincere diagnosis, meaning that the real objective might have actually been to frame Bryan as incapable of making sound decisions, which would set the court up to accept a plea on his behalf, even if he resisted. But in recent days, as we can see, resistance finally broke. Kohberger's lawyers allegedly returned to him with a very hard truth, that if this goes to trial, his own family would be forced to testify. What does that mean? What does that include? Well, it includes his mom, who it appears he spoke to at 6 a.m. the morning of the phone call, the morning after the murders, right after, within an hour or two after he did it. It appears that he called his mom and spoke to her. What did he tell her? She would be grilled on that. His father, Michael, who drove Bryan home from Washington to Pennsylvania in December. On that trip, Bryan reportedly told his dad that he was in trouble at work. That's what we were told. Is that the truth? That's something else that would be grilled. They would grill his sister, who questioned their father after witnessing Bryan clean his car obsessively and hide his trash across multiple bins, possibly to evade DNA detection. Now, this combined with the fear of family embarrassment, cross-examination, etc., this reportedly pushed Bryan towards a deal. Now, you have some other pressure, right? Some of the pressure else that was added in this in recent days was the fact that Judge Hippler recently shut down two key defense strategies. The one about the alternate perpetrator theory, he rejected that, and he also dismissed the defense's argument that Bryan did not need an alibi because he was driving alone. He doesn't need an alibi. He was by himself. He doesn't need one. So his legal team's losing ground and family pressures rising, Kohberger decided to change course. So today, on July 2nd, 2025, Bryan Kohberger appeared in court. Let's show you guys what he looked like today in court. And we actually got to hear him speak. Okay? We got to hear him speak. He pled guilty to all 5 counts in his indictment. 1 count of burglary, 4 counts of first-degree murder. And he accepted a plea that included 4 life sentences, which were counts 2 through 5, to be served consecutively in a 10-year fixed term on the burglary charge. He has no possibility of parole, no sentence reduction, and cannot come to the court in the future and ask the court for leniency. He waived all future rights to contest the charges or sentencing. The judge emphasized that he was not influenced by public pressure and confirmed that the plea was made freely, voluntarily, and intelligently. Now, then the judge had to ask Kohberger some questions, right? Did he understand the charges? Well, here, I'll just tell you what he confirmed. That way. Kohberger confirmed that he understood the charges and consequences. He confirmed that he was not under the influence of drugs or alcohol. He confirmed that he was not promised leniency, nor was he coerced. He agreed that he was guilty and was entering the plea truthfully. He agreed that he had enough time to decide and that he was satisfied with his attorneys. From here, though, and I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a warning on this because this was a little troubling and challenging to hear, okay? And I don't know why, it just was. I'm going to put the victims up on here because that's who really matters with this. So the court read out a timeline of the murders Kohberger admitted to a lot of the points that we know. Some of it we know, some of it we don't. We're going to talk about some of the things. Basically, what happened was the judge asked, if this went to trial, what are some of the things that you would have argued? And that's kind of what happened during this hearing. And the prosecution said that he purchased the K-bar knife and sheath with an Amazon gift card. They said that it appeared that it looked like he tried to delete or modify his Amazon purchase history. That he moved, they brought up the fact that he moved from Pennsylvania to Pullman, Washington in June of 2022 to study for a PhD in criminal justice. They talked about the fact that he connected repeatedly to a cell phone tower near the King Road residence between July 7th and November 13th. He connected, I think, no less than 23 times. Then on the night of the murders, he shut his phone off at 2:54 a.m. and turned it back on at 4:48 a.m. His Hyundai Elantra was circling the crime scene before parking behind the house. There's actually more to it than that. Actually, let me get my notes. Well, do I have my notes pulled up for that? I don't. There's more to it than that, too, that he was seen coming back and forth, circling the area, leaving and coming back, multiple times. He ultimately then ended up parking his vehicle up behind the house, came down through the sliding kitchen glass door, going onto the third floor to kill Madison Mogan and Kaylee Gonsalves. He dropped his sheath with DNA next to Maddie's body. He killed Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin on the second floor. Allegedly, Xana was alive and ran into him, and that's what happened while Ethan was sleeping. He then left the scene at 4:20 a.m. It took him about 15 minutes to do everything. Okay. About 15 minutes to do everything. He drove away fast enough to almost lose control of his vehicle. He was caught on the next door neighbor's camera. His vehicle was at 11, not 11:22. It was 11:11. I can't remember the address, but on the next door neighbor's house, he was caught on their camera. Then his camera tracks him going south, presumably to avoid detection cameras going back from Moscow to Pullman. He turns his phone back on. From there, the phone tracks him all the way back to Pullman, where he arrives around 9 a.m. Goes back to his house, takes that creepy selfie that we've all seen with him in the bathroom with the thumbs up. He took that 9:30 the morning of the murders. He later went back to that house around 9:30, 10 o'clock that morning, or about 10 o'clock that morning. Later, he was seen searching for a K-bar knife and sheath replacement. He was also seen cleaning his vehicle thoroughly and changing his car registration in Washington and Pennsylvania. Let me talk about that real quick, what they said. They said that his car had been disassembled, was in disassembly on the inside, had been basically taken apart and scrubbed and cleaned so meticulously that there was nothing left, to a point that it was suspicious. On top of that, when the murders happened, his car did not have a front plate because Pennsylvania does not require a front plate. So he got new tags right after that, which then put a front plate on his car as well as a new rear plate. So basically changing all of that. Okay. He was also identified through trash DNA that was linked to his father, which matched the DNA on the sheath. And once they got him, they tested his DNA, and it was a direct match for what was on the sheath itself. So Kohberger has waived his right to a pre-sentencing hearing. Victims' families will be allowed to give impact statements at sentencing. Sentencing is scheduled for July 23rd at 9 a.m. and could possibly extend into the 24th if needed, depending on how long the victims' impact statements go. However, prosecution feels that if they start early enough, 8:30, 9 o'clock, they should be able to get through everything in one day. Now, for the record, those dates were chosen because the court had already set aside those dates to begin, jury selection. They were going to bring in 10,000 potential jurors to try to get him a fair trial. 10,000. But because those dates were already there, the court was already open. There were no other things. They're like, let's go ahead and take advantage of these dates because they're there. So that's what's going to happen. Following Bryan's plea, a non-dissemination order will remain in effect, which means the gag order remains in effect through sentencing. So once that happens, we should get a little bit more information after that. Now, following Bryan's plea, his family released a public statement, which was the first time they just sued their attorney. This is the first time since he was arrested where they first said that they were so sorry for all the victims. They were going to pray for the victims and their families. But of course, they would still love and support their son. That's what they said when he was first arrested. So this is the first time they spoke since then. And here's what they said. In light of recent developments, the Kohbergers are asking members of the media for privacy, respect, and responsible judgment during this time. We will continue to allow the legal process to unfold with respect to all parties, and we will not release any comments nor take any questions. They emphasize their desire to step back and allow the legal proceedings to move forward without interference or media intrusion, urging the press and public to respect their boundaries as the case continues to unfold. Okay. Now, I do want to tell you guys about a loophole that could potentially happen with Kohberger. Although I don't think it's going to happen, but I'm just going to tell you something. And I'm going to give you guys a personal opinion that some of y'all are going to be okay with that I'm saying, and some of y'all are not going to be okay with. And I'm going to say it anyways because it needs to be said, whether you agree with it or not. Okay. Hopefully we can still be friends regardless. There is technically a loophole. If the federal government, big if, wanted to get involved, like they did with Luigi and Mangione, okay, Kohberger crossed state lines to commit this crime. He stalked them. Those things allow for the feds to get involved. And that's what Steve Gonsalves is urging. And by the way, for the record, the family, the way they think about this, Stephen Gonsalves and Xana Kernodle's family, which Kaylee and Xana's family want the death penalty. They're not happy with the plea. Maddie Mogan and Ethan Chapin's family are okay with the plea deal. So just to guys let you know, family feelings on this. But Steve Gonsalves wants the feds involved. The feds could charge him because it's basically a different entity. It would not be double jeopardy, and they could quite potentially charge him federally, which would then make him eligible for the death penalty under federal guidelines. That's if they wanted to, and I don't think they're going to. I really don't. To be very frank with you, that could be the exact same thing with Luigi Mangione, right? That should have been a New York thing altogether. New York should have charged him, which they did, but the feds got involved, and the Department of Justice, Pam-Body's Department of Justice, they are going to seek, excuse me, the death penalty for him. And here's what I'm going to say. This is where this is going to be a hard truth. 4 kids from Podunk, Idaho, college students from Podunk, Idaho, aren't worth the feds' time. But one guy who killed one CEO is, allegedly. And that is what it is. Their lives, their 4 lives, aren't worth as much as Brian Johnson. And I'm sorry for what it's worth. That doesn't sit well with me. It just doesn't sit well with me. They're not wealthy millionaire CEOs. So the feds could get involved, but I doubt that they will. I doubt that they will. Now, let's talk about motive, because a lot of people are asking, what is the motive? When will we hear the motive? Will we hear the motive? And the answer is probably not. The answer is probably not. There's a lot of cases that get convicted without the motive being known. And you might not ever know. And Kohberger is very quiet. You have to remember, the most we've ever heard Bryan Kohberger speak was today. That was the most we've ever heard this man speak. He's been quiet. He's apparently been a model prisoner. He's polite and interacts well with people, and that's it, right? He's doesn't give anybody. Basically, he's somebody that's utterly forgettable to the people that are around him, you know. And so he could potentially choose to tell his story later in the future. Maybe he'll write a book. I don't see interviews happening. I just don't, and I could be wrong, and I hope that I am wrong, because I would like to know, just like all of you, what happened. Why them? Why all 4 of them? What was the reason? And why leave another one when you encountered them? I don't know. And I don't know the answer to that. Now, that said, guys, that's where we're at. Sentencing comes for that. So really with this closes some major chapters on 2 very large cases on both the same day. We're waiting sentencing, and that's it at this point in time. And of course, I'll be there to update you guys with that. We do have some other stuff coming up that I want you guys to be aware of. Before I give you guys the last bit of information here. Stephen Stern's trial, I believe, is coming up. He is the girl who SA'd and ultimately murdered Madeline Soto in Florida. He had been abusing her since she was 8 years old. She slept in bed with the mom and the boyfriend, and sometimes the mom would go downstairs and sleep elsewhere and leave her daughter in bed. I have very strong feelings about that case. So we're going to be covering that. There's also a case coming out of Tennessee that I'm telling you guys are going to want to. If you haven't been paying attention or you don't know about it, I promise you're going to want to. Angie Solomon. That's a case that's coming up out of Tennessee. It's one that I was very closely involved with when it first kind of was coming out. And all I can tell you, based on what I know, what I've heard, my sources, is that this is going to be the Angie Solomon case. It's got a lot of layers similar to that of the Murdaugh murders. And you guys are going to definitely want to be following that. So we have some things to kind of get us through what's going on. I hate to say it that way because that sounds so crass, because, I know that, these are people's lives and things like that that are at stake. And I'm not diminishing the value of anybody or anything here. What I'm just trying to say is from a true crime perspective, this is kind of what we're looking forward to the future, not looking forward to, but looking forward like towards the future, to kind of see what we're going to be covering and watching. And then, of course, we have the Tupac trial coming up in February of next year as well. So a lot of those things are kind of happening, and then we'll do some stuff in the meantime. But that's kind of what's going on with there. And then Luigi, you have that too, but who knows what's going to happen with that. That said, everybody, so we got. I'm going to go for the day. I probably won't be back on later this evening because we got to pack, and we're going to be celebrating my daughter's birthday tonight. But I appreciate all of y'all who have been with us through this entire thing. We will be back soon with more updates as soon as we have them. I'm sure things will continue to come out in the meantime. And that said, again, if you are new here, please, one thing that's very free and easy for you guys to do to help support my channel, hit that follow button, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, and follow me on YouTube as well if you don't mind. I'm really trying to be, I'm so close moving over to that next number. I'm on the way to 50,000 there and would definitely love the support. So consider doing that as well. That said, have a great rest of the evening, and we will talk to y'all again soon.